What if the Cleveland Browns use their top two picks in the 2024 NFL Draft, 54 and 85 on offense? Let's play out this scenario. Your latest Locked On Browns starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd, and I appreciate all of you who make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. To the everyday crowd, you guys are amazing. Just keep growing. Join the everyday crowd. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Of course, the show is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big time fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. I've talked that I think the Browns, even though they do not have a first round pick here in the 2024 NFL Draft, the way the draft is laid out, the draft is deep in the top 100. The Browns still can secure good talent at 54, still can secure good talent at 85. Cleveland Browns are not necessarily looking for a current starter, a week one starter from this class. I've decided we're going to do this exercise. This one, we're going to go offense at 54. We're going to go offense at 85. We're going to flip it up, get it out probably later today or over the weekend. We'll do defense at 54 and defense at 85. I think there's bang for the buck to be had for the Browns. Now, I've kind of clarified this, as, players that would be available at 54, slam dunks. I get it, but maybe there's a little reservation and just some general wild cards. Now, the guys are going on the wild card could be several different reasons. Now, 54 have certainly, plenty of talent available. I've talked about my absolute love for Trey Benson. I think Trey Benson, and maybe just because Jonathan Brooks is injured with the ACL injury, and that kind of dampers for the Cleveland Browns. I just don't know how you work with two running backs coming off of ACLs at the same exact time. But they take Jonathan Brooks at 54. For me, it's an absolute slam dunk selection. I'm totally fine with it. Trey Benson at 54. I've talked about it. I think Trey Benson is the best running back in this class. I think Trey Benson improves as the game goes on. I think Trey Benson's got more long speed than I originally had given him credit for. He can work out of the backfield. It's not going to be a requirement. Keep in mind to be moving into a backfield where you had Jerome Ford, very good out of the backfield as a receiver, and certainly Nyheim Hines. It's going to be one of the major roles Nyheim Hines has for this team. Also, a couple other guys that I kind of put here, because the wide receivers at 54, it's interesting because when that run starts and who's exactly going to be available here. Two guys that I'd be more than okay with taking, Malachi Corley. He's going to be a physical slot guy, and who's kind of got that Deebo Samuel reputation where he can do a little bit of everything with the ball in his hands. Keon Coleman. I still, to this point, have no idea where Keon Coleman is going to go in this draft. If you want to, a lot of people think that him moving towards the big slot is going to be the best role for him. I think it's pigeonholing him. I think you're going to see what he can do in the NFL and see if he can do everything. There are separation issues as far as his route running. I get it, but he is big. He is physical. Should be able to get away with a little bit more in the NFL as far as physicality. He's got to learn to use, some of his strengths to compensate some of his weaknesses. He is a physical guy that can hopefully, maybe if he is smart, he can use that to his advantage to come up for the fact that, he does at times have separation issues. But I have both Malachi Corley and both Keon Coleman in this list as slam dunks. The offensive line, as far as pick 54, I'm not against it. But again, looking at the way the boards are shaping out, I think, for the Browns, it might be better value at 85. Again, you're not drafting a starter. You're trying to draft somebody that you can work with to hopefully potentially be a starter, maybe in 2025. Connor Beebe, one of the top guards in this draft. I would put him under the I get it selection. Patrick Paul, very mixed review. The offensive tackle out of Houston. People either love Patrick Paul. People think that there's a lot of work to be done with Patrick Paul. For me, Jalen Polk. And I love Jalen Polk, but it just seems like there's some guys within this draft class that they're barely getting mentioned. And Jalen Polk out of Washington seems to be one of those guys. Interestingly enough, I'm not really sure why. Troy Franklin, I get the positives. I do. The vertical game, all of that stuff. But, like you guys, I've heard many Browns fans talk over the year, oh, well, what's he going to do? It's going to get cold, 176 pounds. That's always been a knock that a lot of Browns fans have had for smaller players who were in the draft process. Troy Franklin probably fits some of those knocks. Me, not my guy. But do I get it as far as, wanting to get the ball consistently more vertical, threatening vertically to open up things underneath? I get it. Xavier Leggett would be interesting. Just big guy, long strider, and the guy can move. 1 year of production at breakout age, very, very late for Xavier Leggett. Kind of spent most of his college career doing not much, and then all of a sudden had this fantastic year with Spencer Rattler this year. I get it. If you were in the Xavier Leggett business, I'm not necessarily sure the Browns are going to be in the Xavier Leggett business. Wild card. Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State, tight end. And this is just kind of something I've been thinking about the last couple of days. New Browns offense coordinator Ken Dorsey now. Of course, Kevin Stefanski just spoke recently about Ken Dorsey and the role he will have, how the two of them are going to work unison into, changes, upgrades that they're going to put to the Cleveland Browns playbook. And looking at Ken Dorsey, who was with the Buffalo Bills last year during the draft, they had a very good tight end in Dawson Knox. And the Buffalo Bills, first thing they did is went out and drafted Dalton Kincaid. So they went out and doubled up a tight end. Could this be something that maybe a Ken Dorsey influence is going to have for the Cleveland Browns? Is, Ben Sinnott somebody that the Browns would value? Would they want a tight end high? Would they want to get somebody in here? Ben Sinnott, on paper, athletically, is very similar to David Njoku, that he is very, very solid player. He will be able to contribute and, does a little bit of everything. Could be a guy that is also a factor on special teams. So I wouldn't sleep on Ben Sinnott. For me, that would be a wild card at 54 and probably a really, really good selection for this team. Two other players I have under wild card, Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall. Age is part of it. Size also kind of part of it. Pearsall, I think, is going to be a fantastic player, but 24 years old, something the Browns just will not do. Roman Wilson, a little bit over the line as far as what the age is that the Browns would prefer at the position. Solid at Michigan. You can't argue with the tape. You can't argue with the production. Certainly think that Michigan, and the way they run their offense, or did run their offense under Jim Harbaugh, certainly held back some numbers that certainly would have been there for Roman Wilson. But 54, if the Browns are going to go offense, these are some guys that I think are just absolute slam dunk picks. These are guys that I just get it. And then just some general wild cards. But I think the name Ben Sinnott, tight end out of Kansas State, is growing on me a little bit more as the draft goes on. And now thinking about Ken Dorsey here, what the Buffalo Bills did last year during the draft, Ben Sinnott could certainly be an interesting name for the Cleveland Browns come draft weekend. We're going to go to pick 85 here, to the same type of thing. Some players that I think will be available for the Browns and how they fit. Would they fit? Your latest Locked On Browns continues. Nobody go anywhere. Guys, I need you all to listen up for this huge announcement. I have been tracking the leaderboards every day, keeping my eye on the scores, putting all my heart into it, and I'm super pumped to announce I am finally on tap. That's right. Obviously, I'm talking about the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on classic Monopoly. You can play anywhere, anytime. You explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to the moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. Charge rent on iconic properties just like classic Monopoly. You can charge your friends rent on your iconic properties, or go after the Monopoly money by pulling bank heists and taking wrecking balls to their landmarks. But my favorite part is the leaderboards, where you can see who's a Monopoly tycoon and who's gone bankrupt. So go get yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store and Google Play. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. Your host, Jeff Lloyd. Appreciate you all for making Locked On Browns your first listen. The everyday crowd. Man, you guys are the best. We need more support. Always subscribe to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Show is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, we talked about, and the whole point here, the exercise episode, say the Browns want to go offense, 54 and 85. obviously, in my opinion, still 2 solid draft picks the Browns have within the top 100. Again, we're not doing defense here. We'll do an episode talking defense. So we talked about pick 54, guys that I think would be a slam dunk selection, the I get it selections, and certainly the wild card selections as well. Now here, continuing on for pick 85. Now, now you start, remember, because I said first segment more about offensive line, I think it lines up a little bit better for the team as far as pick 85 than it does necessarily maybe pick 54. So for me, right off the bat, obviously 2 slam dunk selections at pick 85. You guys know, and we have talked about this entire cycle, Audric Estime and Braylon Allen. And for whatever awards people might want to say they have, we are talking about players that are both going to go into NFL training camp at 20 years old. Audric Estime will not turn 21 until September. Braylon Allen will play almost the entire 2024 regular season at 20 years old. Now, this is what we talk about as far as players and their weaknesses, and this is why age matters. You can expect improvement from a player who's going to begin his rookie year at 20 years old. It is really, really difficult to do that with players who are 23, 24 years old in their rookie years. Audric Estime, a lot of people had their issues about the long speed. The burst is there. The strength is there. You put on the tape, man. Audric Estime can play. Braylon Allen, same type of thing. These are bigger backs, physical backs, guys that would be closers, guys that would be, featured late in the third quarter, fourth quarter, as the team is winning, trying to close out the game. So yes, still Braylon Allen, Audric Estime, slam dunk selections for me. Now we get to the tackles. Roger Rosengarten out of Washington, Blake Fisher out of Notre Dame. Both players just really, really good, but a little bit different. Rosengarten is just a little bit more technician type, clean, uses his size well, uses his length well, is great with his hands. Blake Fisher is just a mean, old, tough son of a gun. Blake Fisher plays with a very physical motor, part of a great unit. Notre Dame has been putting out great offensive lines for years now. Blake Fisher, again, it always seems that Notre Dame has this really great offensive lineman that everybody talks about. But then once you get into the tape and you get into watching it a little bit more, you see the overall depth of the offensive line, how good it is. Certainly notice that with Blake Fisher. Again, he is a young guy himself, very physical, very strong. Big can. It's always about the ASS with offensive linemen and whether or not they can stay at the tackle position. Blake Fisher is a solid prospect here. Both he and Rosengarten, for me, are in the slam dunk categories. Now we get to the I get it's. Christian Mahogany. Look, I don't know how serious the Browns are at drafting guard. It really appears that everything's pointing towards getting another offensive tackle in here. We know Jed is on his 5th year. We're not sure how much of Jack Conklin will get back from, just another injury. And of course, DeJuan Jones, it looks like he is going to be a stalwart for this Browns offensive line for years to come. You want to go interior, Christian Mahogany, Boston College offensive line is another great program as far as turning out offensive linemen. Christian Mahogany, another one in the long line there. There's a lot of talk, of course, about the Washington wide receivers in this draft class. Now, you talk about, of course, Roma Dunzier, who was just fantastic. Jalen Polk, who I talked about in segment 1, is a player I really like. I even like the third wide receiver, Jalen McMillan, excels from the slot, can play outside. He'll be a guy that can do a little bit of both, has good size, has good length. He was a really, really good player, missed a ton of time here in 2023, but still showed up for the playoff run for the University of Washington. I'm a big Jalen McMillan fan. The question is, though, is there positions on offense that could be more important for the Browns right now than, wide receiver? You can stack these positions, and it's certainly interesting as to what would be the preference, as far as Browns' needs on the offensive side of the ball. Johnny Wilson is picking up steam out of Florida State. Very rare do we get a wide receiver who is 6'7". And look, the lineage of guys who were that size playing the wide receiver position in the NFL, it has not been kind. Let's just leave it at that. But there's a specific role for Johnny Wilson within the NFL. You could maybe try to use some tight end routes with him if you wanted to. But if you have a quarterback with solid accuracy, and I look at Johnny Wilson, and I can just run short drags, I can run square ends, I can run slants, I can run posts. And if you have a quarterback with solid accuracy, a guy that can throw the ball over the second level, under the third level of a defense, a 6'7" target is just an amazing asset to have. There's going to be a home for Johnny Wilson in the NFL. How long he sticks with it, that is going to be on him. But if you've got that guy that can get that ball over the Mike linebacker's head and in front of the safeties, when you have a target who is 6'7" and Johnny Wilson, that certainly makes things injury. And it's interesting. And you certainly can use this from the wide receiver standpoint by lining Johnny Wilson up there. What do we always say about David Njoku? He is too big for defensive backs. He is too fast for linebackers. Johnny Wilson could have that kind of effect in the NFL. Delmar Glaze out of Maryland really caught, the eye. Pete went down to Mobile, Pete Smith, and Delmar Glaze was the name he really wanted to talk about. Delmar Glaze, maybe he's an offensive tackle. Maybe he's a guard in the future. I don't think that bothers the Cleveland Browns either way. I think they want to get, a young player, if not two, in here from this draft class for new offensive line coach Andy Dickerson for him to groom. Delmar Glaze could be somebody that the Browns could have interest in. You got to remember the Browns are picking at 85 and don't pick again technically till 155. That is what's scheduled. So there's a 70 pick gap there. So you might see a guy Cleveland take at 85. Could be a spot they trade back. Absolutely. But there could be a name drafted at 85 that maybe necessarily his draft ranking is a little bit lower than that, maybe significantly lower. But if the Browns can't find a taker to trade out of 85, they may take who they feel is a really good player, an option for them at 85. Delmar Glaze could be one of those guys. Marshawn Lloyd's tape at USC was really good. I think everybody just watched USC the last couple of years and they just wanted to watch Caleb Williams. Understandably so. But you see Marshawn Lloyd. And Marshawn Lloyd, the thing that I like about Marshawn Lloyd is as Caleb Williams is doing this Patrick Mahomes type stuff, breaking the pocket, all this incredible scrambling skills, Marshawn Lloyd showed to be very intelligent and showed to always find a way to have himself in the right spot to help Caleb Williams as far as receiver out of the backfield scramble drills. He's tightened up his hold on the rock. His fumble percentage is not good at all. But Marshawn Lloyd goes in the I get it category as well. So you have those guys there. Wild card. We're going to go again to the tight end position here. And again, it's just not being talked about in the Browns and tight ends. And you look at the rest of that room. Certainly Akins, in year two here, not much came from him in year one. Giovanni Ricci, just not seeing it. I don't think he's going to be a rosterable player. I don't think he's going to make the roster. But you would think either A, the Browns are very interested in finding a veteran tight end even this late in the game to bring in, or they do secretly have their eyes on a tight end in the 2024 NFL draft class. Jatavian Sanders had a lot of hype. The combine didn't go the way he expected or probably wanted, but certainly something that the Browns could have interest in there. Also in the wild card selection, I have Jermaine Burton, the off the field stuff, and apparently Jermaine Burton is not the easiest young man to get away with. He is somebody that has a lot of things to say, and Jermaine Burton is certainly concerned about himself. Who knows if that's an issue for the Browns? I do not. Then you also get to Wright, the running back out of Tennessee. The long speed is incredible. He's a very fun looking player on paper. Some development as far as mixing him in to maybe be a top running back in a running back room. So Wright out of Tennessee, he also falls under the wild card label for me. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. I appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. These episodes couldn't exist with the help of our incredible sponsors like Yahoo Finance. Wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. I've been using Yahoo Finance to consolidate mine into one place. It just makes my life easier and gives me better options as far as how I can handle said money. Let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising cost of inflation, to pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of you and financial freedom, right? With Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, data, and tools that you need in order to help reach that financial freedom. When it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great rises, Yahoo Finance. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you to have the insight to look at your wealth in the entirety. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That is yahoofinance.com. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. Of course, we appreciate you all for making Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. The everyday crowd, you're a bunch of filthy animals, but you're my filthy animals. Join the filthy animals. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Show is always available. It's always free wherever you get your podcasts. Now, the point of all this is trying to establish what could be the best bang for the buck for the Cleveland Browns. And look, most of this isn't necessarily about 2024 for the Cleveland Browns as far as this draft. It's most likely about 2025 and beyond. We know the running back situation, the running back room, certainly Nick Chubb's return, cloudy. The future of the room, Jerome Ford, I'm a fan of. A lot of people here probably aren't. I don't understand that, but hey, everybody's entitled to their opinion. So you certainly think the future and the room, running back room going forward certainly has its questions. Certainly the same thing applies to the offensive line room. It's been a great run. It really has been. And for the Browns to have this run with, 4 starters, the center has moved in, moved out. Obviously, you went from J.C. Treader to the Ethan Posick regime. So basically, you had 2 years of Treader, now 2 years of Posick. We know Joel is not getting any younger. As much as we love Joel Bitonio, and his career here in Cleveland has been incredible. Not sure how much longer Joel will still be doing this. Wyatt Teller is 100% healthy. Wyatt Teller is one of the best guards in the NFL. Don't think or sleep on that for 1 second. When Wyatt Teller has been a little dinged up, obviously his play has, suffered a little bit, understandably so. Now, with Andy Dickerson being here, and of course you guys all remember, I know the everydayers remember, when I spoke about moving on from Bill Callahan, I kind of felt that maybe it was the perfect time. It's not normal to have an offensive line stay together as long as the Browns have. The Browns were smart. They loved their line. They liked what their line did. They committed the money and the resources to keep that line intact. But now it's not a question of whether or not you want to keep it intact. It's starting to see the realization that, some players are just probably, not necessarily going to be in their prime anymore. And, whatever Jack Conklin can give this team this year, I think Jack should be good to go. But I mean, this is a lot of injury toll on the man's body. So to see what Jack Conklin can give the team in 2024, we'll see. We know Jed is, right there on the 5th-year option. How much more time he has in Cleveland is certainly, a question, and it's a real legitimate question to have. And the Browns eventually are going to have to find a way to save some shekels here, save a couple of bucks, some couponing, if you will. And that would come from drafting some offensive linemen here in 2024 to start shaping that room up and starting to get a picture and an idea of what that offensive line room is going to look like 2024 and beyond. The wide receiver room, look, it is a great class. It truly is. And, I think the Browns should be in on a wide receiver in this class. There's no question about that. But the Browns are 3 deep. We know the issues. Obviously, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, pending free agents after 2024. Jerry Jeudy in. Jerry Jeudy contract extension done. Jerry Judy's not going anywhere. Then you have the David Bells of the world. You certainly have the Cedric Tillmans of the world. How firm is the future for both of those players here in Cleveland? David Bell going into year 3, Cedric Tillman going into year 2 rather. So a lot of questions as far as, what is the rest of the wide receiver room and how does that wide receiver room look? Will Jerry Jeudy have a strong enough 2024 season where maybe that room is rebuilt around a player like Jerry Jeudy? Certainly all possibilities and, things to watch. The tight end position right now, look, after David Njoku, man, it's barren in that Browns tight end room. And it seems to be one thing that nobody's talking about or nobody cares to talk about right now. The Browns tight end room is certainly interesting. And when I say interesting, not interesting in a good way, going further for the Browns is certainly something to keep your eyes on for the Cleveland Browns. It's not talked about enough, though, tight end room. Why it's not talked about enough, I have no idea. But it is a big gaping hole. Many of us talked about how the Browns probably should have been in the tight end position last year and the year before when there were 2 ridiculously good tight end classes. Browns zagged when everybody else zigged. So, here you are in this weird situation. Do I have confidence the Browns are going to put out a competent group? Yes. David Njoku, obviously we all saw last year, just absolutely solidify himself as one of the top 5 tight ends in the NFL. when he came into the league, everybody always wanted to talk about, the athlete he was, and the blocking came along pretty well. And it took a while, really, for all the receiving aspects to totally come together for number 85. But David Njoku has turned out to be an absolute monster in this league. Browns got a great one. They were patient. They rewarded. They even extended before it was maybe even necessarily proven just exactly what David could do for this team. But the Browns were rewarded in their faith in David Njoku and now have one of the best tight ends in the NFL. This was just some thoughts here. If the Browns choose to go offense at 54, offense at 85, this may not be the way they go. We're certainly going to do a defensive episode to see maybe if the defense was the focus at 54 and 85. Just all things that we're going to do for you here as we get closer and closer to next week, the 2024 NFL drafts. In my opinion, the best sporting event of the entire year. Truly looking forward to it. Appreciate everybody for following along. You guys know I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd. I appreciate you all for making Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. The everydayers, if you were not part of the everyday crowd by now, make a new plan, stand, and subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Show's always available. It's always free wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to continue putting out draft content, any valid, legit Cleveland Browns news breaks. That is going to come that'll go obviously right in here, these episodes. But right now it is draft time. We are getting close, less than a week away at 2024 NFL Draft, Detroit, Michigan. See how Detroit handles it, see if they can match what Cleveland did a few years ago. Appreciate you all for being around. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB on ELOB. Let's go, Browns.